Hey everyone, welcome back. And today we'll be diving into a fundamental concept in C programming, which is functions. Now, functions are an essential part of any programming language as they allow us to structure our code, make it more modular, and easy to maintain. Now, let us go over the basics of a function and see how we can write our own functions. Now, what is a function basically? Now, a function is basically a self contained block of code designed to perform some specific task. Now, functions help us to organize code into smaller, manageable sections which can be reused. So, let's say if I want to perform some instructions repeatedly in my program. So, instead of writing the same instructions again and again, what I can do is I can define a function, and wherever I want to perform those instructions, I will call that function every time. Okay, so that's how we use functions. For example, the printf function. If I want to print something to my console, I will use the printf function rather than writing the code for the printf function every time I want to print something. Okay, now breaking down a program into functions make it easier to read, maintain, and debug. Now, by writing functions, we can significantly reduce the line of codes which we put in a program. Now, let's see the basic syntax of a function. And here's the simple structure of a function. So first what we'll have is, first we'll have the return type. I'll just explain in a second what is this. The function name. Then we'll have the parameters. Parameter 1, parameter 2, and so on. It depends on the programmer. Then we'll have the body of the function, that is the code to be executed. And then we will have a return statement. Now, not necessary that a function should always return a value, but we'll see what is this. Okay. Now, this is how we define a function. I'll just increase the size of this so you'll be able to see it properly. Okay. Now, let's begin with the first word, that is the return type. Now, what does the return type do basically is, the return type specifies the type of data the function will return. Okay, return type specifies type of data that will be returned. Then we have the function name. Now, function name, what does it do basically? It is the name of the function. Okay, and whenever we are naming a function, we should make sure that we should give it such a name that highlights what the function does. For example, if we want to print something to the screen, I will name my function print. Okay, so make sure we give a suitable name to a function. Okay, then we have the parameters. Now, what are parameters basically? These are variables that are passed to the function. Now, these are the basically the input value that the function will process. So, what are parameters? Variables passed to the function. Now, whenever we pass some variables to a function, it is called as a parameter. Okay, a function will take certain parameters, it will perform some operations on them, and then it will return the value of that operation. Now, okay, so parameters allow functions to take input values when they are called. And last we have the return statement. Now, what does the return statement do basically? If let's say if a function, if we are performing addition of two values a and b, so our parameters will be a and b, and then we are adding the value a plus b and storing it in C, we want our function to return C. Okay, so if a function needs to return a result, then we will use the return keyword. Okay, return keyword is used to return a result. Now, it's not necessary a function should always return some result, but in case we want to return some result, we can use the return keyword. So what happens is, whenever someone calls the function will perform some operations on the parameters or the values passed to the function, and then it will return the output back to the person or the code calling the function. Okay, now let's go ahead and see this with a simple demo. So I'll open my Visual Studio Code. We will create a new program, functions.c. Let's go ahead and write. So first I'll include my standard input output library. These are known as header files. So we'll learn about header files in some time. Now let's say I want to add two numbers. Okay, I want to add two numbers and return the result. Let's take an easier example. Let's say we want to find the square of a number. So I'll define a function here, int square. So here int is my return type. So what happens is when my function returns the square, it will return an integer value. And now I will name my function. Now I have named my function according to what it does. So that is, it gives us the square of a number. And now we will give the parameter. We will mention the parameter. So in this case, my function will take as input an integer number and it will give the square of that number. So how will we remove square? I will just mention the return statement, return num into num. This will give us the square. So as you can see, what will happen here is, here int is my return type, square is the name of the function. I have one parameter here, which means my function will take one input and it will return the square of the input. Okay, now let's go ahead and see how we will call the function. This is known as function definition. When we define a function as such by writing the code and all, it is called as function definition. Now I will call my function. Now I'll call my function int result is equal to square. Now whenever your function returns a value, make sure you store that value in some variable. So in this case, what will happen is when I will call square, my square function will pass the value 5 here to this, and it will return the value of 5 into 5, that is 25, and it will be stored into this variable. Okay, and then I will print the value of the square. Square of 5 is %d, which is basically 25, and result. So my return value is stored in result. That is my answer. Similarly, in the main function, we return the value 0. Remember one thing in the main function, which is from where the program starts to execute, a value. If it returns a value of 0, it means my code executed successfully. If it returns any other value than 0, it means some kind of error has been encountered in my program. Now let's go ahead, compile and run this program. As you can see, the square of 5 is 25. So this is how we can define a simple function and call that function in order to give us the output. Now similarly, what I can do is, if I want to remove the square of other numbers, okay, I can do that too. Now you can see here, this helps me in what way? Basically, it helps me by reducing the line of codes. So if you see here, if I compile and run this program again, I can find the square of two numbers without repeating the same instruction again. Oh, sorry, I have to give this a different name. I can't give it the same name. Yeah. As you can see, the square of 5 is 25 and the square of 6 is 36. Okay. Result 1. Let's go ahead, compile this and run it. So as you can see, I can call this functions as many times as I can want. Okay. Now let's go ahead and see some other concepts in functions. Now, what are parameters and arguments? So there are basically two main parts to a function, that is parameters. Now parameters is basically when we define a function, we specify what values the function can take as input. These are known as parameters. And when we actually pass these values to a function, they are called as arguments. So arguments are basically the values which we pass to a function. So if you look at the previous example here, the value 5 here is an argument, and in the function which I defined here, the input value which it can take, that is int num, is the parameter. Okay, so whenever I'm passing a value to the function, that is called as my argument, and the type of value which it can take as input, where I've defined my function is called as the parameter. Okay, this is the argument and this is the parameter. So this is what parameters and arguments are about. Now my function can take as many parameters it wants. So let's take another simple example. Let's say I want to add two numbers. Okay, uh, int a and int b. Let's say I want to add a and b, and here my function will return the value of a and b. And also when I'm calling my function, I want to pass two values. So 5 plus 5 or 5 plus 4. Now let's go ahead. Let's change the name of this function as add. We will perform simple addition here. We will add the value 5 and 4. Now this should give me an answer of 9. Okay. So as you can see, I can pass as many arguments to a function, but I should make sure that it matches the number of parameters which I have defined. Now let's come to the next concept, which is function declaration, function definition, and function calling. In C programming, there are three main parts to using a function. That is function declaration, function definition, and function call. Now function declaration basically tells the compiler that a function exists and gives its return type and parameter types. And function definition provides the actual code for the function. And function call is when we call a function in order to perform the required task. Now in order to understand this better, let us see a simple example. Now let's say in C programming, what do is, we all know the main function is responsible for executing the code. That is the function from where the code starts its execution. So we write the main function, and inside this main function, let's say I want to add two values and store the result in a variable. Okay, so I'll call the function add, and I'll add 1 and 2, which should give me 3. And similarly, I'll print the value, that is sum is %d, and I will print the value of the result, that is a plus b, and I will return 0. Now I have, as you can see here, I haven't defined the function add. I have only called the function. Okay, I have called the function. This is called as function call. Now let's see if I define the function add here, int add, int a, int b, these are my parameters, and then I will return a plus b. Now if I compile and run this program, this will give me the value 3. So let's go ahead and compile and run this. As you can see, the sum is 3. So as you can see here, what I have done is I have defined the function. This is called my function definition. Definition is when I actually write the code of the function. And here is the function call. So what is function declaration? Now, in order to understand function declaration, we need to understand how C programs are compiled. Okay. So in C programming, what happens is C compiles the code line by line. So if I try to call a function that hasn't been defined yet, the compiler will not know about it. Okay. For example, if I remove this function, if I remove the definition, and I will just call 1 and 2, let's see what happens here. If I try to do this, if I compile my program will not get compiled. Okay, if I try to run it, it will throw an error because the function add hasn't been defined. So now, as we know that I can define functions anywhere in my program. But what happens if I define the function add after the main function? Now in C programming, the main function is the first function to execute, right? Now if I define the function add after the main function, when and since C compiles my code line by line, the function add is called before the function add is defined. In this case, add has been defined later and has been called first. So in this case, what will happen is my compiler will either throw an error or it might give a warning. So if we try to compile this, what will happen is my program will get compiled, but it will throw a warning in this case. Okay. If I run my program, I'm still getting the correct value, but here I have got a warning. Now, as a good programmer, we should try and avoid this. we should tell the compiler, we should inform the compiler that my add function exists in the program, but it has been defined elsewhere or it has been defined after the main function. So function declaration allows us to basically inform the compiler about this. So how do we declare a function? Very simple. I will mention the return type, the name of the function, and the type of the parameters. This is known as function declaration. Okay. Now if I go ahead and compile this, I will not get a warning. So if I go compile this, as you can see, the warning has been removed. Okay. Now function declaration, basically it has informed my compiler about the function's name, that my function exists. Okay. The only thing is that it has been defined after the function has been called. So this is what function declaration allows us to do. And it also allows us to perform type checking, which basically allows the compiler to check the types of the arguments passed. In this case, my arguments passed are integer, and what the function is expected to return. So this is a good practice which all programmers should, who are coding in C, should know about. Okay. So this is what function declaration, definition, and function call does. Now, as you can see here, we will just write down the syntax for declaration, definition, and calling. So very simple. In order to declare a function, I'll just put the return type, the name of the function, and the type of parameters it takes as input. This is known as declaration. In function definition, I will actually define my function int a, int b, and I will return a plus b in this case. Okay, and function call is where I will actually call my function. So this is all about function declaration, function definition, and function call. Now, and that's all with the basics of functions in C programming. Now, if you like this video, please like and subscribe and stay tuned for more videos further. Thank you.